from the Key Radio Studios in Provo, Utah, and broadcasting live throughout Utah County, Sevier County, South Central Utah, Carbon County, and the Uinta Basin. It's your good friends Mike and Heather in the morning.
It is election day. Your vote counts. Go and make it count. Okay, that was our public service announcement. Today is also, more importantly, Donut Appreciation Day.
Come on.
It is.
Really?
I don't make this stuff up. I think there's like, out of 365 days in the year, I think there must be like 200 days where we appreciate our donuts.
I think you said that last time I came in. I just don't appreciate. I mean, is this?
We always appreciate our donuts. I mean, we just do.
Yeah,
we don't even need a day for that.
No.
It's very important.
Yeah.
Today was a special day because Grant brought in his Halloween candy.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I know you put a costume on and worked very hard to get all this candy, but so thank you for sharing it with us.
Oh, I did not do that, no.
No?
No, it
Okay.
was for trick-or-treaters, for children.
Oh,
Whatever.
And,
I see.
Blah,
and
blah,
then
blah.
not enough came. Nobody came.
Nobody came.
Nobody came.
So then I'm left with this big bag of candy.
And a bellyache.
Yeah, and it's like, I can't eat any more of this.
See, I never understood. Like we would buy candy, which, we try to do the good candy, and then our kids would go out and get candy. And it's like the candy that they got is garbage compared to what we were giving out. It's like, why don't we just keep our candy?
You're giving away a Milky Way and getting a hard sucker or a root beer
Tootsie
barrel.
Roll or one of those.
Root beer barrel.
Yeah,
What's up
or
with that?
those,
What is
those
this?
peanut butter chewy taffy things that
Oh,
are
yeah.
wrapped up in that orange and black paper. That's nasty.
This is just a ball of wax.
Yeah, people don't actually eat that
Why
stuff.
are you just giving out colorful balls of wax? These are candles.
So I'm just saying. I just think that it was just better to keep your own candy sometimes. Having said that.
Thanks for sharing, Grant.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad we got that off of. This is funny. Matthew West, he's a Christian music artist, right? And he wrote a quick little poem. And I love this because, these musicians, they're very good and eloquent with, making rhymes. He goes, "'Twas the day after Halloween, and Daddy's no fool, gonna eat all their candy while the kids are at school." Yes, Matthew West, you're the best, man. So in the studio with us, of course, you're hearing other voices besides Mike and Heather. We've got Grant, who is pushing all of our buttons, and of course, working on the faders too. You told me that the other day. And it's been a while, but Christy Morella's in the studio as well.
It's great to be here.
It's great to have you
Thank
back.
you so much.
Yeah, well, no.
Saw you
Thank
at the
you.
0.5K in
Yes.
October. So at least I got to see you in October.
Right.
So now we're back on the show.
Yay!
So good to be here.
Well, we're going to put you to work too, that's for sure.
So you've committed your time to being a parent.
Yes.
That's
That's where we went wrong. Just joking. Our kids are great. How many do we have again?
yeah.
No, it's great.
My son came up to me and said, "Dad, do you love me? Am I a great kid?" And I said, "What was your name?"
Yeah.
I messed
Sure
that-
you are. Who you are?
Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, sure you are, Timmy. My name's Walter. Yes.
It's like, are we
That's it.
friends on Facebook?
Yeah. It's not official if we're not friends. Oh, man. But no, it's exciting. It's really exciting. Children are just a blessing from the Lord. But boy, did they stretch you as a parent,
Oh,
huh?
they do. You think we was at a parenting conference Saturday, and the guy said, I used to think before I got married, I was this gracious, kind person. And then I got married, and I realized I'm pretty selfish. And then kids came along, and I realized I'm very selfish. So God uses them to show where we need to grow, and that's good.
Yeah.
We need that,
Yeah. Isn't that funny how the Lord does that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That does a lot of it too.
Yeah.
So,
More than we'd like to admit sometimes, right?
this morning, Heather, I was reminded of your days that you worked at the bank.
Yes.
And there was a time the lady came in and said, "Could you please check my balance?" And you walked around the counter and gave her a push.
Oh, man.
Now, there's a billboard on the highway. It
Where's
says,
our rim shot? Boom, boom.
There's a billboard on the highway that says "Dad jokes rule," and that was a dad joke.
Yeah.
Yes.
So-
I'm not sure about the whole rule thing, but yeah, that's good, honey.
What was your joke from this morning?
I'm telling you, we're all done with those. Oh, man. So here's a funny little story. There's this woman from Oxfordshire, England. Actually, I think a lot of people do this, but for whatever reason, she made the news. Her name is Jessica Poole. She's 25 years old. She has 3 children, but her last, the third child, she started suffering from postpartum depression. So she's trying to figure out how to deal with all that. But she noticed that her kids would take themselves away when they needed some quiet time and just kind of whoop, make themselves scarce. And everybody seemed to have their own space except for her. So she's like, So in her house, she has a stairwell. And so underneath the stairwell, she just started pulling everything out of it, right? You know, like it's usually just a little place to put junk in it. And she made for herself a little tiny mum cave, like, you know, and she's from England, so it's not mom, it's mum. And it's just her little space. And, you know, she's like, you know, she put a little reading nook in there, some happy scented candles and all that stuff. And she said, you know, it's just like 5-minute recharge. She still needs to be close to the kids, and this allows her that, but just gives her that distance. Then I'm kind of laughing at the story because I'm like, there is a big flaw with this. Because if you have your designated space and the kids know that, and this is your space, they will know where you keep your secret stash of chocolate, and
That's
that
right.
is bad.
Yeah. This reminds me of Mom's Night Out.
Yes.
When she hides in the closet and she's watching was it eagles or something? Little baby
and
eagles in the
eating
nest.
chocolate everywhere, wrappers everywhere. And I've done that. It's so, I'm just going to say, I will never judge. One time I was hiding from the kids. They're a little older. Yes, I did.
This is parenting.
Yeah, I know. Just for a little
We're
bit.
going to have a parenting conference
Yeah.
right here.
You want to hide from your kids
Just
because
needed
they're annoying as all
5
get out.
minutes. That's all I needed.
Have
And
your husband build a little secret cove inside the
You want to
closet.
hide under the stairs like Harry Potter.
so I went and like on the side of my bed, it's kind of hidden, like you can't see on the other side. And I have a little secret stash in here. So I'm sitting down on the floor, just like letting the bed hide me so nobody could see me when they come looking into the room. And I'm eating my chocolate, just trying to be really quiet and mouse-like. And all of a sudden, 3 heads pop over the side of my bed, and they all 3 of my kids looking at Mom, busted. And I'm like, just give me a little time. This is me. It was not one of my finer moments, and they still pick on me to this day. How do we get started on this anyway? Why am I talking about this?
Parenting. We were talking about parenting.
Yeah, we're talking about you, Chris.
Yeah.
Tell me about you.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so what one thing that you have learned about, other than the selfish thing, we all get that, but what's one thing that the Lord has been teaching you through having a son?
Oh boy, you know, we kind of got a late start, so I would just say for me, it's just so transformative. You can't before you have kids, you can't even begin to know how your life is going to be different. And you know, there are the challenges like we talked about, but just a blessing. And you look back and you think, man, I can't even picture life not having these kids, you know, not having Benjamin, or and sure you with your kids, you know. And so you just see that through all of that, just the bonding that takes place, you know, and even the struggles and all of it. It's all a blessing, you know, and it changes you so much. And
Lack of
and
sleep.
so what's that?
Lack of sleep.
Lack of sleep, yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
It's amazing how much sleep you realize you don't need, or you need, but you can still function, kind of.
Right. All of a sudden, those naps, those mid-afternoon naps, become pretty valuable.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not, worth their weight in gold. If you, that's great. Well, we are glad that you were able to make some time out of your busy schedule.
Absolutely.
Because they would
Absolutely.
just rock your world. And actually, we have a great topic to discuss. We started a new series yesterday, and I'm not really sure what we're going to call it yet. Isn't that sad? Like, we always have like, oh, what if we called it this? Yet, like yesterday we had Chris Willett in, and he's like, well, you know, it's No Shave November, and it's questions, so we could say, I must dash you a question. And I thought that's really funny, but it
It
might be a
doesn't
little.
tie together that well.
It
I
doesn't.
think that's kind of like falls in the category of dad jokes. I
Yeah,
think.
see, ugh, right back to the dad jokes. So then we thought, well, we could just say, what's the question? But really the idea is it's questions that God asks. And it's, when you read the Bible, you don't really think about those things. But 14% of the questions that are in the Bible were asked by the Lord himself. And you're like, what? But God doesn't ask questions to obtain knowledge, because he's already omniscient, which is that fancy word for all-knowing. So it's for something quite different. We're going to explore another way that God is using his questions. Today we're going to focus, we're still in Genesis, but we're kind of clipping ahead to Genesis 16. The question is, where have you come from And where are you going? This ought to be good. My friend, get out your phone. Here's the text line, 855-539-4583. And hey, you give us a question too. That'd be great.
Can you check my balance?
Stop.
Okay, Radio Life Unlocked, Truth Unleashed. Mike and Heather in the morning with Pastor Chris D. Morrell.
Yes, Chris D. Morrell, not Christy Morrell.
Right. I used to do that when I was little. I'd say it too fast. People say, "Oh, your name's Christy," and I say, "No, no."
Why did my mom name me Christopher? But today, my friend, we are going to talk about questions that God asks. And today we get like a 2-for-1 special because really it's a compound sentence, 2 questions in one. And it is, where have you come from and where are you going? I just have to say that Whitesnake, do you remember that hair band from 1982? Mm-hmm. That was one of the songs. They said, I don't know where I'm going, but I sure know where I've been. I feel like that's what poor Hagar is going through here in this particular passage. You're like, Heather, I can't believe you just put Whitesnake and the Bible together. That's just horrible.
Yeah.
See,
sorry.
I didn't grow up in a Christian home, so sadly I know I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's just awful.
Well, let's lay some foundation on
Yes.
this, Chris. What's the story? Where's this come from?
Yeah, it's just I love when Heather emailed me the topic because she put in there, she's like, one of the main things we're going to do is pay attention to context. And I was like, that's great, because I've heard it said when you look at real estate, it's location, location, location. Well, when you study the Bible, I don't think it's an oversimplification to say context, context, context,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right,
Because we always
right.
want to look at where something's found, because really we can make most anything in the Bible mean what we want it to mean if we're want to try hard enough, right?
Yes.
So in chapter 15, Abraham's been given the promise by God that he's gonna have a seed. Abraham said, I have no offspring, but there's this one born in my house. And God says, nope, one who's going to come from you is going to be your heir. And then he has him go outside. He looks at the stars and says, if you're able to count them, so shall your descendants be. Then he believed the Lord, he reckoned it to him as righteousness, right? So
I love that
that's
part.
salvation right there. And that's what Paul uses in Romans. And so Abraham's been given the promise. He's been declared righteous, reckoned as righteous. And so God telling him that he's going to have numerous descendants. And then we move over to chapter 16. And now we always, whenever it seems like when God gives us some great promise or does something great in our lives, there's always the test, right? We're gonna put that to the test. And so Sarai, we don't want to be too harsh on her, but she was still barren at this point. She has no children, verse 1. And she had an Egyptian maid who was Hagar. She said to Abraham, behold, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Please go unto my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children through her. Abraham listened to the voice of Sarai.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Human beings, huh? We're always muddling
boy.
things up. Well,
Yeah,
let's
that's
see.
for sure.
God, your timing, I don't understand. Let me help you a little.
Isn't that true? Right. And how many times do we look back and think, wow, God had it, and he really didn't need my help, I should have just let him do what he had planned. That would have worked out better for me and a lot of other people. But anyway, so Sarah has this proposal. Abram, we'd like to think, should have said, "No, Sarah, we're gonna trust God." Mm-hmm. Nope, we can't do that. God told me that one that will come from our seed will be the heir. And so anyway, the promise that was given to Abraham was he was willing to wait, but one commentary said that Sarah decided to resort to surrogate marriage, which was perfectly respectable practice. In the other cultures of the ancient Near East, the child born to a slave girl could be regarded as the wife's own child if she had no children of her own. So we got to realize she was acting in keeping with the custom of that day.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And doing what she did.
Yeah.
And suggesting this. So, but the issue came in that she blamed God for her infertility, right? God has prevented me. And it says here, she suggests her motives were defective. And then verses 3-4 echo the description of the fall, implying sin. And so it kind of goes on saying that this really was not the scheme. This was her scheme and not God's scheme. So
Well, and when I'm looking at this, to be fair, God is sovereign. So maybe, yes, he did prevent her from having children. But I think part of that, in his doing that, then when she's able to have children or whatever God decides he's going to do, God will get the glory
That's
for it
good.
because
Yeah.
otherwise, it would have been like, no big deal, right?
That's good.
Oh, there's a kid.
Yep, absolutely.
Wow, it happens all the
And
time.
it's part of the process of our trusting God too.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they didn't do such a great job here in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
What I
Right.
like too, though, Chris, what you were saying about starting with chapter 15 and figuring out where that lands. Abraham, his faith in the Lord, his trust in the Lord was counted to him as righteousness. That does not mean that Abraham, or at this case, Abram, it doesn't mean he's not going to sin. He's
Right.
a perfect guy now, right?
Right. Right.
He's still trying to navigate things. He doesn't understand everything. He still has to just kind of live and walk with the Lord and learn as he goes. And so you don't see it where God is saying, "Oh, you know what? You're not righteous anymore." In fact, in Hebrews, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that at all,
that's
right?
great. I love that.
Yeah. So
Let's
there's
just
hope
take
for
God
all
at his
of us.
word, right? Yes, exactly. That is terrific. I like that. And we're going to see how God can use even. I love this. What it says here it says, "Yet divine mercy brings out good of human folly." And so we're going to see how God's going to intervene now in this kind of
Okay.
less than perfect demonstration of what you're saying of an imperfect faith, yet we have a perfect God.
Yes.
And so we're going to
that's
see
good
how he
too.
can use that. So, yeah,
Okay.
I love that observation.
All right.
So now we have a problem.
Yeah, we do. Boy,
Yeah.
oh boy, do we have
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah, Sarai has some jealousy
Oh, yeah.
and some issues now, and
Yeah.
and
Well,
that-
Hagar kind of got a little bit,
Yeah.
she all of a sudden it says she looked with contempt on her mistress.
Mm-hmm.
So she forgot where her place was. All of a sudden she's like, aha, I can have kids and you can't.
It
So
seems
you're
like
less
there
of a
was
woman.
something going on like that. Yep,
Yeah.
definitely.
So,
yep.
I
Yep.
always laugh about, it's like, just the concept of God's design for marriage is perfect. In this situation, they are not following that design.
Right.
And look at the problems that are happening.
Yeah.
It's just,
Right.
This is
Right.
not a good thing.
I think that follows through anytime we see messing with the original plan of
Yeah,
marriage.
that's good.
It makes for messes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's messy
Yep.
enough the way it is.
I think we need to.
You ain't kidding.
Yep.
Oh,
That's a
man.
good point. It's almost hard to, if not impossible, to come away from this and just say, and we're not trying to single anyone out, but like you said, when we take things in our own hands, whether it's plural marriage, which when you look in the Bible, there's never a positive example of it, and it's always negative or neutral at best. And so this is another instance of that.
So, in essence, then, we have a biblical cat fight.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah.
Hagar, she is regarding Sarai with contempt. And and I'd like to think that Sarai is very gracious in response to that, but that's just not the case, is it?
Right. Verse 5 says, she says to Abram, "May the wrong done me be upon you." And so she said, "I gave my maid into your arms. When she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her sight. May the Lord judge between you and me."
Ooh,
so
she's mad.
Wow. Boy, Abram responds, verse 6, "Behold, your maid is in your power. Do with her what is good in your sight." So Sarai treated her harshly. She fled from her presence. So, there's that rivalry. And when we depart from God's plan, there's going to be that human, the sin nature comes out, right?
Yeah.
And so we see that here, sadly, even with Sarah. And so verse 7, angel of the Lord, and this is where God steps in, found her by a spring of water in the wilderness by the spring on the way to Shur. And so he's going to step in now. Don't you love this when God steps in the picture now?
Yeah.
Isn't this fantastic? Yep.
What I love about this particular place in Scripture is that he's revealing himself to a woman from Egypt. She is not of Abraham's family, even, and yet the Lord saw fit to, approach her. I know that there's not the Mosaic covenant at this time because this is, Abraham's the first patriarch, but it does show you God's heart for his creation, for his
Amen.
people,
Yep.
right?
Amen.
I love the
That's
tenderness here.
That's right.
Okay, sorry,
Yep.
I got excited.
Even though the people of Israel, their chosen people, God still has regard, like you said, for people who are non-Israelite.
Right.
And what a foreshadowing we see of how God's gonna extend his plan of salvation to the Gentiles even here.
Mm-hmm.
Just a beautiful picture of that. Yeah, I like that. That's a great point.
Oh,
Yep.
so good.
Yep.
Okay, so Sarai deals harshly with Hagar, and Hagar decides she's going to run away. And because that's what we do, right? We don't want to face the problems. We're just going to run away.
Right.
And
Yep.
then God intervenes.
I think we need to put ourselves into Hagar's shoes too, for her to be kind of put into a situation which she shouldn't have been put into.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to be too hard on her either. So she's confused. Now she's hurting, clearly. And so she's fleeing. And one of the interesting things here is we see angel of the Lord. And where we see that phrase, it's not necessarily always what we would call it's a fancy word, is a theophany, an appearance of God.
Mm-hmm.
But we can tell this is God because verse 10, we'll just jump ahead just a little bit. God's going to say to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants, so they shall be too many to count. So the angel speaking in the first person in a way only God can speak.
Okay.
And so that we don't want to maybe just clarify that for those who maybe aren't that familiar with this passage. We're not talking about just any angel here. We believe this to be a manifestation of God himself appearing to Hagar. So,
Wow.
so neat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, some believe this is a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ in the Old Testament, and that and so
So we just learned a new word today. Theophany. Yes?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Put that into your little notebook and we'll move on.
Put
Yeah.
it in. You can do a whole series on theological terms. Right?
Yes, exactly.
You could.
Oh, that'd be a lot of fun. Let's
That'd be
put
a
that
whole
down.
show in itself.
Yeah. Okay,
Yep.
my friend, we're going to go to some more music because I really want you to just kind of soak in what is going on here. I mean, we have to look at these are real people in a real situation, and it is really bad, okay? And how would you react in a situation like that? I mean, sometimes we just have to step into the narrative to understand that these are human beings that have emotions and they're confused, like what Chris is saying. And so we do need to understand that this isn't just something that's, oh, it's a nice story and you move on with your life. No, what's going to happen here? And it's amazing that God would just insert himself into the timeline here of humankind. So 855-539-4583, that's our text line. You're listening to Key Radio. Key Radio, Life Unlocked, Truth Unleashed. You got Mike and Heather in the morning, Grant at the controls, and Christy Morrell. And he is leading our conversation on questions that God asked. And God gives us two today in the book of Genesis, chapter 16. Let's get to the question. Okay, so Hagar's running away. She gets to this well. She's on her way to Shur, which I would assume is Egypt, right? And then she encounters God, which is astounding. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? All right,
Good stuff.
What's he after?
Just thinking an interesting study would be God encountering women at the well, because in John 4, we've got another instance of that, right?
Absolutely, the woman at
Christ,
the well.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that I just thought of that as you were talking there. But yeah, two-part question. Just saying at the break here, I know for me personally, when I step into a situation, oftentimes I'm guilty of wanting to insert myself and assert myself, right? And so I've just heard Sharon a little bit earlier, a good apologetic technique is always, for every assertion, try to ask like 3 or 4 questions when talking to people. And questions just have a way of bringing out provoking thought within the person. And it shows that we're not coming in, and of course God knows everything, so I'm not relating this to him, but it just shows that when we're dealing with people, we're not trying to show that we already know where they're at, or we know what all their questions are. Okay, I have all the answers now, so put your seatbelt on, right? And it shows a humility, drawing out from the person where they're at. We see that in the garden with Adam and Eve. And so, it's a 2-part question. Where have you come and where are you going, right? So like you said at the beginning, God's not, his information, his understanding, his knowledge, it's perfect. It's not, there's nothing incomplete about it. So God's not trying to gather information for his own understanding. This is for Hagar. This is just a compassionate, like you said, the slave girl. Maybe we could just let her go and just let her be gone. Oh well, c'est la vie. We'll just move on with life. But nope, not God. He loves her. She's made in his image. She has dignity. She has worth in his sight. And what a beautiful thing here he does. So he steps in, asks this two-part question, and really she answers the first part of the question, but doesn't answer the second part. She says, "I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai."
So she probably doesn't know where she's going.
That's kind of what I thought too, right? She doesn't know where she's going, right?
I just need to get
Right.
away. I
Right.
don't know.
Exactly.
Poor
But the
Hagar.
question gets a little processing going on in the head.
It
right?
does. Yeah, it does.
Well, and
Yeah.
isn't that good? Like sometimes when we are overwhelmed and we have to go back and go, okay, whoa, what has just happened here? Why am I
Yeah.
going through what I'm going? And where do I think this is going to lead?
Wow. Yep.
You know, I
That's
think
great.
those are really good questions that we need to ask ourselves. Clearly, she
Yeah.
wasn't asking them, so the Lord's helping her to process.
Right. That's good.
That's so tender.
Yeah. And I think if we encounter somebody, I was thinking of this, as far as practical application, let's just say you met someone who's running away from home, a teenager or whatever, and you just sit down with them, and instead of just getting, hey, you need to get back, say, now where you come from? Where are you going? What's your plan? Okay, you're leaving home, but where are you going? what are you going to do for yourself? And so maybe that would cause them to think, well, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going.
And even bigger picture, where are you going? I mean, as far as your life,
It's good. Where are you going to meet in the immediate and then in the long term? No, that's great.
Well, and it's really important that when we're running away from something, that's not good. God doesn't want us to do that, but He wants us
good.
to run toward Him.
Wow. Yep.
Right? And I
That's
think
great.
that is our problem. All of us, every single human being on the face of the planet, in the past, in the present, and in the future, too. We all
Yep.
need to know where we're going,
That's great.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if your destination is not the Lord, then maybe we need to stop, screech everything to a halt and say, where are you going? You are working a job. You have a family. Maybe you're raising a family. Maybe you like to travel and you're just going everywhere. But at the end of it, what is the destination? Is any of this worthwhile? Where is your final destination?
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
And I think now would be a great time to talk about what Christ has done for us, Mike.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you mentioned woman at the well, and just before that, in John chapter 3, Jesus encounters a Pharisee named Nicodemus, and their conversation leads to Jesus telling Nicodemus that he must be born again. Okay.
Yep.
And so Nicodemus is like, well, go back. This
Go back to your mother. That was weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what Jesus was talking about, it was being born spiritually. And we see Jesus completing a work not much later on the cross that made it possible for us to be reconciled with God. We're sinners. We're separated because of that. We can't be with God because we're sinners and we've rebelled against Him. We've all done it.
Yep.
I mean, every one of us has this heart that's sinful. But Jesus, in His work on the cross, paid the price for that sin. He provides us His righteousness. He lived that sinless life. He died to pay the price for us. So we get His righteousness. He takes away our sin. And because of that, we are seen as righteous by God, and we can have fellowship with Him. We can have, and the neat part is the certainty. We talk about the future and where we're going.
Yep.
Well, we know where we're going, not because we're good enough. We know where we're going because we're trusting in a work that was absolutely sufficient and reliable. And that's the work of Christ and not our own.
Wow, that's great.
And that leads us right back to really Abraham in chapter 15, right? Where he
Amen.
just believed in the Lord
Amen.
and that was counted to
That's
him
right.
as righteousness.
That's right.
God's plan has never changed.
Right.
I love that part of it.
Right.
Okay, what does Hagar do? Let's go back to poor Hagar. What's going on here? How does she respond and what does the Lord do with her?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what Mike just said, because when there's been that new birth, that born again, I loved 1 John says, if we have fellowship with God, we have fellowship with one another. And so I'm not really going to read a New Testament version of salvation into this, but oftentimes when we've been wronged, we've been hurt, when God intervenes, rather than running from the people that we've been in conflict with, God often wants us to go toward them. And that's hard, right?
Yeah.
We don't naturally want to do that, right? And so immediately God says, return to your mistress and submit to her authority.
Oh, wow.
Moreover, now, had she just kept running or had she just ignored God, she would have missed out on this blessing of verse 10. I will greatly multiply your descendants. They would be too many to count. Angel said to her further, behold, you are with child. You shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has given heed to your affliction. And verse 12 goes on and talks about some of how his life is going to be.
He'll be
not
a wild
really what you
donkey of a
consider a
man.
blessing, right? Maybe not
Sorry, you got to read that.
in the typical sense, but yeah,
is
it's
funny.
part of it. It's part of what God tells her. And she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, thou art a God who sees, for she said, I have seen and remained alive even after seeing him. Therefore the well was called Bir Haloroi because of the location there. So
Oh, wow.
yeah. So
And
play on
here we
words.
have God sending her back into a situation that wasn't perfect, and just dealing with it and
Yep.
submitting.
Well, and that's just it, because Hagar wasn't submitting before. I mean, she was making Sarai very distressed, right? I mean, there was no good relationship there, but an encounter with the Lord, he says, you will do this. You
That's
will
right.
submit to
Yep.
Sarai. And there will be blessing as a result of obeying not really Sarai, but God.
Wow, that's
Right?
great. Wow, that's so good. Yeah, and so going back to the illustration of a runaway teen, where we would encourage them, go back to your parents, even though they're not perfect. They're not perfect,
Of
right?
course, depending upon the situation, of course.
Depending on the situation, but whatever. Right, we don't want to send them into a situation where there's abuse or anything like that. Right, that's a good. Thanks, Mike. But we would just say go back by submitting to them. If they're a Christian teen, with either case, you're submitting to God by submitting to your parents, right? And so that was a great point, Heather. You said that God tells her that, but ultimately she's obeying God in doing that. Yeah.
And that's a major theme of the New Testament too, the whole submitting. And we see in Romans 13 that we're supposed to submit to the rulers and authorities,
Wow. Yep.
and other places too. We're supposed to submit to church leaders. And
I'm an American. I do that. No, no, no. Oh,
Very,
wow.
very anti-American, Mike.
Yeah. Wow. I'm my own person. Oh, man.
Oh man, that
But
goes
let's-
against the grain for
it
sure.
does.
Yeah.
It does. Let's just go back to the question then.
Yeah.
Back to the question. Where are you going?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where are you going? Where
Yeah.
have you come from and where are you going? And
Wow.
I think we can really safely, looking at what Hagar was going through and seeing how Hagar then returned and obeyed the Lord, that's wonderful. But now let's talk practical application for us here, because the Lord gives us this information not just so that it's delightful story to read to our kids at night, which I wouldn't recommend necessarily, but how do we apply this to our own lives, Chris?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we need to see that, like Mike, I appreciate him giving us the gospel right there, because we live in a fallen, broken world, and that permeates into our relationships, and just like we've been talking about, we need to realize that even, like I think you pointed out, Heather, you made a great point, that even when we've been wronged, we still need to respond in a right way. And there was a little bit of conceit even on Hagar's part that we see. So Hagar, we look at her as the victim, and she was kind of mistreated here, but there was things that she could have done better too. And so I think we need to realize that we can't control what other people do, but we can control how we respond to the situation, right? So here she is gonna submit, she is going to go back, and so she's making right in a sense, even where she's been mistreated. She hasn't done anything perfectly herself, but God gives us those opportunities to kind of make the situation right, to be obedient, right? We don't have to just say, oh, that's it, it's all over. No, God's grace, and we can come back and have those relationships restored as best we can. So, yeah.
And we see some Romans 8:28 stuff in here too, where here's a bad situation, and God turned it around for good, and she'll multiply your offspring, so they can't be numbered. And that was a major blessing.
Oh,
point.
absolutely. Yeah.
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 I love how she calls God, you are a God of seeing.
Amen.
And we forget that, I think, when we're going through difficult times and we're crying out to the Lord, and maybe he's really distant or we don't feel his presence. That doesn't mean that he's not there. that doesn't mean that he doesn't see what's going on. In fact, it's quite the opposite. During those times when we are struggling, he is probably most present.
Isn't that true? Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Heather,
Yep.
do the footprints in the sand.
No, stop. But I think we do need to allow God to carry us through. I mean, sometimes when we're going through difficult trials and stuff, we're putting up our dukes and we're fighting it out.
Man.
And maybe we need to settle down and just breathe and trust and lean, press hard, if you will, into the Lord and ask him to, help, because I have no control over this. But Chris, like what you were saying here too, Hagar was a servant. She was a woman, and in that culture, women were not anything really,
Wow.
right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
here God reveals himself to the lowest of the low.
Yes.
And she is taking great comfort in knowing that, wow, this God sees me. This is incredible.
good.
And we need to know that
Yep.
God sees us too.
Mm-hmm.
We need to see
Amen.
that. And maybe, my friend, you're not feeling that. Maybe, I don't know what your situation is, but maybe you're not feeling that God is seeing you. But he is. But I think the first thing that we need to understand is that he's not really worried about changing your circumstances. He's not worried about maybe even getting your relationships back in sync. He's worried about your heart right now. And he was worried about Hagar's heart. That's why he was asking the questions that he was. And maybe he's asking you about your heart. Where were you and where are you going? And maybe the answer that he wants you to come up with is, you know what? I was away from you before, Lord, but I want to run to you. I want to run to you today. And my friend, that's what you can do. And the Lord is opening up his arms to you. Today is the day of salvation, like what Mike was just saying, right? And what does it take to be saved? It's just simply trusting in God, trusting in what Jesus has done. There's no special incantations. There's no special prayers. You don't have to get baptized for salvation. None of that. We do things for the Lord out of obedience, yes, but we do that because he's our Father. But you have to be adopted into the family of God, right, Chris? I mean, you can't just, hey, we're all children of God. No, we're all children of wrath.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not automatic, and God, the fact that he saves any one of us is an act of mercy. He's not obligated to save anybody. Right.
Right.
And so he intervenes. And I love you drawing attention to the fact that he's a God who sees, even when we don't feel that. Right. And it may not seem like it, but he's always there. And I read in Ezekiel this morning, one of the things they said, God has forsaken the land and he doesn't see. And so they use that as justification to go off into sin and defilement, defile the temple, all kinds of sin, because they thought, oh, well, God doesn't see. And how much trouble do we get in when we think God doesn't see?
And God
Yeah,
gives them the son that God was planning on giving them.
Yes.
Yeah.
that's right.
Yep. He made
That's
good
right.
on his promises.
That's right.
Too.
Yeah.
He is trustworthy.
Even when they're like super old, like 120 or something like that.
Yep, it's amazing.
You
It's a wonderful
got to stay
story.
tuned for the rest of the story. That might.
You can read it. It's in the Bible.
Yeah.
And I think, too, God was intervening in Hagar's life. Maybe right now God is intervening in your life by listening to this. And maybe God is saying to you, come to me. Come to me. Don't be running away. Run towards me. And if only you got that out of today's discussion.
Wow, absolutely.
Woohoo!
Whoa.
Then good. And
I remember my last show, we were talking about Philemon, right? And the runaway slave, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Same idea.
God is so
Yep.
gracious. He's so good, and he loves you so much. My friend, today, just trust in the Lord Jesus. If you want to talk more about this, please contact Key Radio, and that's 855-539-4583. You can email us if you like to do that, mail@keyradio.org. You can pop into the Provo studios here, 307 South, 1600 West in Provo. But please, do it today. Talk to some. Maybe we can just connect you to pastors and men of God who will be able to share the gospel with you, like our good
Amen.
friend Christy
Amen.
Burrell.
We can talk about the gospel over his Grant's Halloween
Oh,
candy.
yeah.
We also have a prayer submission form on our website, keyradio.org. You can go there, give us as much or as little information as you want, but we'll be faithful in praying.
Yeah.
Pastor Chris, you are preaching where at right now?
Right now, just helping out at First Baptist Church in Nephi.
Okay.
So, so as part of our transition, I've made myself available to area pastors to just plug in if they need it. I've already filled in at a couple churches since then, and so
Wonderful.
So just
You're working hard.
I want to just be a blessing and be a servant, and so
Wonderful.
I appreciate you.
Well, thank you for
appreciate
coming
Key
in.
Radio and the opportunity to be here with you. So thank you.
Well, thank you
Yep.
very much. And thank you for letting us spend time with you today. Have a wonderful day.
This has been Mike and Heather in the Morning, a production of Key Radio, located in beautiful Provo, Utah. For more information about the program and the ministries of Key Radio, check out our website, keyradio.org. On behalf of Mike, Heather, and the entire Key Radio staff, have a blessed and glorious day.